Well, Sean, you're a man who worries about his Hampsteads, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Well, you're not alone, because so does the Chancellor and
Mrs. Reeves.
Mrs. Reeves. This morning, it was announced that the CMA, which is what you and I would remember as the Monopolies and Mergers Commission,
Yeah.
but now called Competition and Markets, has now, they've launched a market study into the 8 billion private dentistry sector following what's, quote, intervention from the Chancellor.
Well, okay.
So I guess she's just said, look, guys, I'm not happy about the price of private dentistry. Go and take a look.
Do you think that's because of a personal visit she's had to the...
Well, it could be, couldn't it? Because we did say, I in her spring statement, which was rather unfortunate, wasn't it? Because it was sort of all blown apart by the potential implications of what's happening in the Middle East. But anyway, she did look very kind of smart, didn't she? Longer hair, nice blue suit.
Softer, wasn't it? A lot softer than she has been in the past.
The style gurus, gone is the Reeves bob. So maybe she's had her Hampsteads attended to and balked at the price. Yeah. So maybe it's that. Anyway, the way it works is the CMA first have to do a market study, and then they decide if a full competition investigation is necessary. So it's a bit like, light first, heavy later. That's the way it works. And it won't come as a surprise. This follows the increasing number of people who are being forced to use private dental care because, NHS dentists, hen's teeth, aren't they? You just, or
quite
a bit
literally.
like your wallet, you can't find it anywhere. But and a bit of stats just to evidence-base this. A fifth of people used private dental care in 2024. I thought, well, that's a bit of an old reference, but that's what we said. And the average price for a private consultation has increased by 23% from 2022 to 2024. Apparently, it's 80 quid to have a private consultation.
Crikey.
Yeah. I will contest some of these figures because I have a real-life example to share. Okay, we'll come back to that. So, as always, with these reviews, the Chancellor wants essentially the CMA to say, is there a competitive market for private dental care? In other words, if you're not happy with price being quoted, can you easily go elsewhere? That's a funny thing, that I think there's a slight nuance with dental care in that I think a lot of people don't want to switch dentists because you've got a history with the dentist, x-rays and a relationship. So it's not as simple as the stark ability to switch, I don't think. And it's a bit different. It's not like your gas, is it? Where you can just switch and you don't care who you're with.
No, they have seen. I mean, they used to have problems, didn't they, with gas? And they've simplified. I mean, what you were talking about there is quite interesting because I'm almost of the view that if they're trying to create more competition within the dental industry, exactly as you said, if you decide to move from one dentist to the other, they ought to be given a certain period of time to switch your records over electronically from one dentist to the other.
Well, that may be one of the remedies, as they call them, because that's what happens. Because I was involved in the banking, one of the pricing inquiries into small businesses, and the CMA came out with a load of remedies, in other words, actions that you have to do. So that could be one of the outcomes if it gets to full investigation. Now, there's the professional association, the BDA, as opposed to BMA, the British Dental Association. And not surprisingly, they've argued that private practices have had to cover significant increases in overheads following inflation and the Chancellor's budget of November 24, which is true. We know that would have increased their costs. BDA have estimated that private fees have increased 13.8% in the last 4 years. Hold on to that. But they argue that their costs have increased by as much as that in 1 year. In other words, the dentists are making less money now than they were 4 years ago. Now, at this stage, I hear you say, have we got a real-life example?
Have we got a real-life example?
Funnily enough, we have.
Oh, we have.
So I have had a direct debit for my dentist who doesn't do NHS for a number of years. It used to be with Dem Plan, other brands available, but they then brought it in-house. So I don't know what they call it now. But In the last 4 years, so that's 23, 24, 25 and 26, this is the percentage price increase of my direct debit. You ready? 2023 plus 22%. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
2024 plus 9.5%. 2025 plus 6%. And this year plus 6%.
That's a lot more than 13% then, isn't it? Which is
yes, if you add that lot up, and I know you've got to do a jiggery pokery,
and there's a
but
cumulative
it's about
as well. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Well, cumulative from 2022 is 48%.
40, a lot more than 13% then, isn't it?
So I'm sorry, BDA.
Yeah.
My lived example. Now, you might say you're lucky enough to be able to afford private care, but frankly, there's no choice. And actually, we're doing the NHS a favour because it's a well-known fact that dental health is a sort of forerunner. Poor dental health is a forerunner of poor general health. But that's by the by. Stepping back from all this, it does feel that Mrs. Reeves is right, that this market does need some investigation. But there's a big part of me saying, is it just another symptom of how healthcare, dental healthcare is just a complete mess? And this wouldn't happen if there was easy access to NHS dentists.
I agree with you entirely.
That's the question.
I agree with you entirely. And I think the part of the problem is the failure of NHS dentistry has meant that there is sufficient demand within the private sector to allow them to put their prices up. There's even private dentists around this area who are saying, no, we're closed for private patients at the moment. You can't sign up anymore.
Private patients?
Private patients, yeah.
Well, there you go.
Some are saying we're still taking private patients, but some have closed for private patients. And I think that's an indication of the failure of, well, it is here. You can't get an NHS dentist for love nor money in this area. I'm not quite sure what it's like on your side of...
Oh, exactly the same.
Yeah.
Not even for the kids. It's the kids I worry about.
But what's quite interesting, isn't it, is that the BDA have been arguing that the NHS isn't paying a market rate for what they're looking for in terms of... and I don't know whether you heard this, but what's being said today by the private dentists or dentists who are meant to operate within the NHS are paid contractually in advance. And at the end of last year, they sent back £900 million to the Treasury. So that's nearly £1 billion to the Treasury of work that they didn't undertake within the NHS network. So effectively what they're saying is we don't really want NHS work anymore. We've got enough work. We're making enough money in the private sector not to take that work, which is astonishing, really, isn't it? So it's not even a question of money, although it is, but it's a question of the rates that the NHS are prepared to pay them, which they can now command in private practice outside of the NHS. And there's no, if you like, there's no compunction for them to get involved in NHS.
Well, no. The BDA also say is that private dental treatment is good value for money because it uses techniques and material not available to the NHS. So even if you get into the NHS, you're sort of getting treatments and material from the Stone Age.
You hide that. But then I suppose you could argue that in terms of your prescriptions, couldn't you? In that they're generic drugs, aren't they? And if you're forced to have a prescription rather than being the actual top of the range. So that's an argument I can. But I just feel as though, because the problem with the CMA, as you pointed out earlier, that's just going to look at whether there's a market. So there's not a cartel taking place, so that they're not. All the private dentists aren't getting together and saying, we're fixing our price. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. As long as there's a market there, so you can go from one to the other, then they're going to come back and say, well, we can see no evidence of price fixing. There is a market there. But that doesn't mean to say that if you live in Knightsbridge, for example, and you're on minimum wage, that you're going to be able to find a dentist in Knightsbridge that maybe is doing private work as a dentist in Hull, for example. It's just not going to happen. So that doesn't really help you to a degree, does it?
It's possible that the Chancellor's move is not solely down to her own dental treatment and the horror at the bill, but it could be part of a pincer movement. In other words, it's another bit of evidence to go alongside whatever it is. I guess it's where Streeting is cooking up. for looking at dentistry in general. And then the thing we haven't mentioned is, and I know I've got to be brief, but unless looking at a foreign dentist, all dentists are trained within our university system. I think it's a long degree. It's about 6 or 7 years.
Right.
Now, they obviously pay for that and they come out with a lot of student debt, but it doesn't reflect the real cost of having gone through that education. So there's a bit of payback, and the Tories were suggesting some sort of a period of service where you have to serve the NHS for a period of years. That's just difficult to do, isn't it, in a sort of relatively free economy?
It is.
So in conclusion, I think we both welcome the referral. I think it will probably lead to a market study, not least because I think there's a political leaning to this nod in the direction of the CMA, and hopefully they'll come out with some solutions which will favour patients.
I think you've got more faith in that than I have.
Well, there you go. You've got to have faith.